the gist of it for us is Mary has really had a vision and has come up with a set of practices that really relate to all of our Episcopal communities that have to do with how we invite people, both via word of mouth and technology, how we welcome people, and above all, how we connect people when we actually get to know them. And it's that connect piece that, for Grace St. Luke's, is often our greatest challenge. I've asked her to speak to us today and focus on that more than the other two pieces. Mary, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Richard.
You got a few minutes?
Got it. Glad to be here. Good morning. Yes. So I was here, and I loved being here last year. And what I'm going to do this morning is I'm going to give you a real brief run-through of sort of an overview of this work, and then I'm going to focus in on the Connect Essential. So invite, welcome, connect. I was just telling Richard, I've taken this in one form or another to 26 dioceses now. And I ran into Bishop Curry at General Convention. I was serving as lay deputy to the Diocese of Texas, and he was my preacher for our first National Invite, Welcome, Connect Summit at Camp Allen last year. And so he came looking for me the last day of General Convention. He says, I need you to come to my diocese, and I want you to keynote the 200th annual North Carolina Diocesan Convention. He said, now, I'm not going to be there. I'll be in New York, so so I'm grateful for that, that he is very aware of Invite, Welcome, Connect, and he's a real advocate for it. And I was telling Richard, I'm finally writing a book about it. I've been doing this work for about 5 years, creating this material, as he said, came out of the Diocese of Texas, creating the material to really help our churches. We originally started out looking at it as a welcome piece, and then I realized pretty quickly that it needed to be invite and connect. We needed to know how to invite folks and then to really connect them into ministry. And so when I first started creating the work, I looked at the core values, are prayerful, intentional, which is really being systematic, being relational, being accountable. I started running into challenges, and I talked about those here a year ago. And as I do this work around different contexts, all the way from New York City just a couple of weeks ago to Bainbridge Island outside of Seattle just 2 weeks ago, and people tell me, our context is just so different, and our culture here is just so different, from all the way from the East Coast to the West Coast. But when it gets right down to it, we're all the same, right? We're all the same individuals, and we need to be affirmed. We need to be welcomed. We need to have an understanding of who we are, how God has gifted us. And so some of the challenges I first ran into, and I'm still running into them, is the first one is complacency, and I really see that in the Episcopal Church as we get very complacent about where we are. We either like the size of congregation that we have, or we get real complacent about newcomer ministry as a whole. And then another one is inaction. We, at the end of the day, it's not what we teach, it's not what we preach, it's really what we model. And did we really see Christ in the newcomers who come to see us? But more importantly, did they see Christ in us? I run into fears and assumptions. And a lot of fears are that they think that I'm going to ask Episcopalians to do something that's uncomfortable for them. And I don't do that. What I do with the Invite Essential is I give tools to help us invite other people. And one of the assumptions I ran into, I was at the Lexington Cathedral early in this year in Lexington, Kentucky, and this man came up to me and after the forum, and he said, he was telling me the story, and I said, would you let me videotape that? And I pulled out my smartphone. So I'm going to just look at this. This is a cradle Episcopalian who is there at Lexington Cathedral. All right, skipped over this. This is my Connect information. Here we go.
You ready? Recently, a retired bishop recently told us a story about a time he was preaching on evangelism at his cathedral, and after the service, an older lady came by and said, "Bishop, I don't understand all this of preaching on evangelism. If the Lord had wanted anyone to be an Episcopalian, they already would be one."
Yeah, I went, yeah, this is true, this is true. Another one that I run into is obstacles, what I call obstacles, and they're varied and they're many. The biggest ones are sacred cows, and I'm sure Richard didn't have any of those when he came to Grace St. Luke's, right? And I'm saying that facetiously, because those sacred cows are those traditions that we have that we think we can't let go of, that are really important to us. And what I say about those sacred cows, that we need to address them. One little story I tell is I went to one church when I first started creating this material up in East Texas, and the rector asked me to come speak to the vestry about this work I was doing. And I went there on a Friday night, and he was giving me the tour of the church and introduced me to this woman who was sort of part-time staff. And I said, how do you get people to go from the nave across over here to the parish hall? There's this courtyard in the middle. And she said, it's really hard. And I said, well, you know what, you could have your coffee hour right out here under these big old oak trees, courtyard. She said, oh no, we have bees. So I looked at the rector, he kind of looked at me funny. So the next day after the vestry retreat, he said, Mary, would you share that story with the vestry? I shared the story with the vestry, and a man was sitting there who grew up in the church, was baptized there, and he says, Mary, I have never seen a bee on this property, ever. So she had decided for years and years and years that bees were probably attracted to donuts, and they literally had never had coffee hour out there. I was at Oklahoma, and I had taken this work to the Diocese of Oklahoma, and I was, talking about the sacred cows, and this one priest gave me a tour of this big church in downtown Tulsa, and she says, Mary, you know the sacred cows you were talking about? I said, yeah. She said, we have a herd of them here. And what I say with the sacred cows, someone said, just kill them. I said, no, we don't want to kill them. We just have to address them or put them out to pasture or something like that. Real quickly, invite evangelism is inviting people not only into a relationship with you and others in your congregation, but into a relationship with Jesus. What I researched, the Pew Research, used to say, this was a statistic, 3 out of 4 people say that they would come to church if someone bothered to invite them. That has moved up to 86%. Recent research says 86% of the people questioned say that they would come to church if someone bothered to invite them, just someone invited them. Episcopalians invite someone to church about once every 37 years. So what I do with Invite Essential is give tools. I give tools everywhere from little moo cards and postcards to, thank you, to who are you in the community, and all the way to communication and social media, and how do we use social media as an evangelism tool. It's really, really important that we understand how critical it is that people today, one of my churches in the Diocese of Texas did some research on that all the new people that had joined the church in the last 2 years, 76% of them had first looked at the website. And I'm telling you, I was just at Holy Communion yesterday, and I'm friends with Sandy Webb, and I was out at Holy Apostles in Collierville months ago, and all these young clergy that you all have here in Memphis, it's just fabulous that you're all together and that they work together. But what I said yesterday was, you know what? When an Episcopalian moves to Memphis, probably the first thing they're going to do is get and look at the websites of all the Episcopal churches. And whatever's on your website will draw them in. And there's a lot of vitality here. Everybody, and you're all sort of different. You all have different cultures, which is really, really great. You're not in competition with each other. But that whole thing with social media, I can't wait to meet Broderick Greer, your associate, because he tweets amazingly, and I can't wait to meet him because I started following him, and I don't tweet very much, but I have to now because my bishop is following me and Bishop Curry is following me. So there is a certain amount of accountability with that. But so social media and the way we use it is really important. I really talk about one of the things I mentioned in Invite, I wanted to show you this real quickly, is ways that you can do things, and y'all are doing a lot of those things here at Grace St. Luke's, where people can come in and be invited, because sometimes it's easier to invite someone to come to an event that you're doing rather than coming to a worship service, right? So there's something called Meetups. I don't know if y'all are familiar with it, meetup.com. And this is one of my young priests of the Diocese of Texas. I just want you to hear what he had to say about that.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Abbott, the Rector of Holy Comforter Episcopal Church in Spring, Texas, and I have a story to share with you about Invite, Welcome, Connect. Deciding to step out into the community and to invite the larger community to church, I created a Meetup using Meetup.com at a local Starbucks. The Meetup was called Saints, Sinners, and Skeptics, and I hope to draw in people from all religious stripes and no religious stripes. It was met with great success. A lot of people showed up. One of the people who showed up was a woman. She was burned out, she was freaked out, and she was confused by her past with Christianity. Those are her words. And she came to our meetup hoping to make peace with her past so that she could move on. Well, she met me, she met a couple of other Episcopalians here from Holy Comforter, and we invited her to come to Holy Comforter on a Sunday. She walked in our church doors. She was welcomed by our newcomer ministry. She felt at home. And then a little bit later on, we had her for a newcomer cafe. That's how we learned to connect with her. It turns out she can sing like a bird. She's now joined our choir. And she even sang in the Diocese of Texas annual council choir in February. So from the time she first darkened the doors of an Episcopal church in July, then she was singing in the council choir in February. It's a pretty amazing story, and she'll be confirmed in May when Bishop Fisher comes. It's also awfully providential. Her husband is an architect, and as we are going through a major building campaign ourselves, it is a huge blessing that they have walked in our doors. This could only happen using the Invite, Welcome, Connect method of stepping out into the community, welcoming those who come into our doors, and then connecting them to the life and to the ministries of the church.
Jimmy. So the deep truth of Invite is courage versus fear. Courage versus fear. Welcome is a ministry of hospitality, and it's in Joan Chittister's book, The Rule of Benedict, she writes, the rabbis wrote, hospitality is one form of worship. Come right in and disturb our perfect lives. You are the Christ for us today. And this welcome essential covers everything. I cover everything from first impressions all the way to follow up with visitors. And we don't know when someone comes in the doors of our churches what's going on in their lives. You know, most often we don't even know what's going on in the lives of the people sitting beside us because we haven't taken the time to be in relationship with them. I tell the story of my young grandson who was born 5 years ago on September 11th, bookended by my daughter-in-law on the 10th and my son who was born on the 12th. They were in southern New Jersey. And he couldn't suck or swallow, so they life-flighted him over to the DuPont Hospital for Children, where they found he had this very rare neurological disorder called Mobius syndrome. He had a little small arm and hand, club feet. They put a feeding tube in him and sent him home. My son comes home from the hospital. I had been up there taking care of my granddaughter, and he says, Mom, find us a church. I got on the internet. I found one little church that had a website 5 years ago, little Presbyterian church. So we go to church on that Sunday morning with all the paraphernalia and that a baby with a feeding tube would have. And not one single person even asked us who we were. It was pretty depressing. It was really sad for me. I had begun doing this work. A couple of weeks later, little Ike was in the neurosurgeon's office, and he literally stopped breathing. Put him back in the ICU. They determined he had something called central apnea and tracheomalacia. They put a trach in him, hooked him up to a ventilator, and he stayed on that trach and ventilator for 2.5 years. He started getting a little bit better. They pulled him off. This was last year in Washington, D.C. at an international conference. He'll never be able to have facial affect or smile. Has a little bit of autism. His cognitive function is good. And my family lets me tell this story, and I tell this story because my family needed community. And my family needed a faith community. And when they come in the doors of Grace St. Luke's, the Holy Spirit brought them here. And our job is not to bombard them like we're selling them a used car, right? But it's to be in relationship with them, and it's to let people know that we see them. The deep truth of welcome is seeing the other. Seeing the other. So with welcome, I give a lot of suggestions. I'm going to be meeting with your leadership this afternoon, and I can't wait to hear because they've been really looking at the material and examining it, and I can't wait to see what they're doing with these essentials. One of the things I I tell the clergy and the leadership is, you know what, if they give you their information, make sure you get in touch with them some way. I love a little hand-addressed card. For a long time, I told people that, you know, if they give you their phone number, you need to call them. Well, then one of my young clergy finally says, Mary, if they're my age, 29 years old, he said, I'm not going to call them. I don't want to be called. He said, I'll text them or I'll send them a Facebook message. So I was in San Antonio, and I was telling this story, and this woman comes up to me, and once again, I pulled out my smartphone, and I said, can I please videotape you? So listen to what she had to say.
Hi, I'm Joyce Merritt, and my husband and I moved to San Antonio July 2014. We were looking for an Episcopal church, and we went to another church, and something didn't fit. Anyway, we came to St. George, and we thought it was a nice church, and the rector, Ram Lopez, has a little spiel during the announcements, and he said, I don't know why you're here, but I know who brought you here. And I thought, well, that's a lovely thing to say. And he also said that he would call us. That afternoon, we were doing something and the phone rang, and I didn't recognize the name or the number of the phone. And I picked up the phone, and it was Ram. And he said, hi, it's Ram Lopez. I'm just calling to say welcome to St. George. And if there's anything I can do to help you, I would be happy to do so. I was shocked. I handed the phone to my husband, and he spoke to Ram. And then when my husband put the phone down, we looked at each other. And for the first time ever in our history of going to new churches, and we've been to a lot of new churches because we've lived all over the States and in France, this is the first rector who's ever called us. And we were, as the English say, gobsmacked.
Gobsmacked. So some people want to be called, right? So the last one is connect, and I'm going to really focus the rest of my talk this morning on the connect essential. I needed to give you a little background on invite and welcome. Connect is really giving meaning to membership. It's helping discern giftedness. It's empowering laity for ministry. It is, I lovingly, affectionately call it closing the back door. I've only gotten pushback a little bit about that. The reason I call it closing the back door is because it is my experience, and I have statistics to prove it, that in our medium to large size churches in the Episcopal Church, as many people go out the back door as coming in the front door. And we have to find a way to gently close the back door. One of my young clergy, when I first started doing this work, he said, I'm thinking we need to leave the back door open for a few people. And I said, you have some EGRs in your parish? He said, I don't know what that means. I said, it means, extra grace required. But the Connect Essential is first and foremost about offering a safe space where newcomers can share their stories, first of what brought them here to Grace St. Luke's. The last thing in the world that you need to be doing when you have newcomers into your parish is to tell them all the things that you can do for them. We need to listen to people's stories. We need to hear their stories of what brought them in, because something brought them here. There's a reason that they showed up to begin with. It's offering that safe space, and then through the sacred act of listening, help them discern their giftedness, and then encourage them in their journey of faith. Connect is offering clear pathways to belonging. Clear pathways to belonging, where newcomers are guided in their journey of faith and into the life of the congregation, where they're empowered and equipped to live into their baptismal covenant by offering their individual gifts. And at the end of the day, Connect is all about relationship. It's all about relationship. We were created, we exist in the image of a relational God. And our spiritual and our human connections are what give our life meaning. Recent neuroscience research confirms that we humans are hardwired for connection, that our nervous systems actually want us to connect with other human beings. So it shouldn't be surprising that when people join our churches, but they don't find those relationships that are so critical to their spiritual, their mental, their emotional well-being, they go right out the back door in search of that deep longing. Simply put, Connect helps people claim their life's work as ministry, as spiritual practice, that their daily work, your daily work, can be holy, sacred work. Am I being fruitful to my gifts? I'm passionate about spiritual gifts. Do I live faithfully? Do I show up fully for what I've been given? There are so many reasons, today that we look at today of our world and why people don't come to church. And it's, all the statistics that are out there are saying, so many people don't find a way to come into our churches. And I found this video. It's really good, and I want you to take a look at it. It's the reasons people don't come to church.
Here's a few reasons why people don't go to church.
I can't come to church until I get my life together.
Church is how I got my life together.
Church is filled with a bunch of hypocrites. And there's always room for one more. All they care about is your money.
They care about me, not about my money.
Is there some kind of dress code?
Yes, the code is wear some clothes.
Church, it just makes me nervous. I was nervous at first, and then I felt right at home. I'm not sure I believe everything that you believe.
But you can still belong.
Church is for wimpy, girly men.
You want to say that again?
If you knew me and what I've done, you wouldn't want me.
If you knew me and what I've done, you wouldn't be worried.
You can come to my church even if you were brought up Catholic,
Baptist, Methodist,
Jewish,
Mormon,
Lutheran, Pentecostal,
Presbyterian,
Church of Christ.
Southern Baptist.
a little bit of everything and a whole lot of nothing.
See, it's not about a religion, it's about a relationship.
so please come to my church.
Where nobody's perfect,
Where beginners are welcome.
where socks are optional.
but grace is required.
Where forgiveness is offered.
Where hope is alive.
And where it's okay to not be okay. Really.
So why would anyone want to join a church today? This quotation comes from Sam Potero. He's an Episcopal priest. He's written a great book on brightest and best on saints. He says this: behind our preoccupation with externals, our materialism, our careerism, lies a deeper human need for validation. Some welcome place to be who we are, some appreciative and useful way to make our lives count. When people come in to Grace St. Luke's or any other church, they may be asking these questions, where do I fit in? Can I make friends in this church? Is there room for me relationally? Does this church need me? Can I find a place to belong and serve? Am I safe here? And our job is to listen to people, to hear their stories, to find out what brought them here. Last year I talked about how this just extends to the people also that have been members here a long time. It's not just the newcomers. The Connect Essential is so critical, and we are dismal at it in the Episcopal Church. Because a lot of times people are sitting in our pews, and they've been sitting in our pews for years, and they come to church, and they're members here because they want their daughter to be married here, maybe, or they want to be buried here. But they've never gotten active and involved in ministry. And what I say, and I say this to clergy and to leadership, it's most of the time our fault. Because we haven't taken the time to listen to people, to help them discern their giftedness, to help them find their passion, to help them find their place of ministry in this church as a layperson. And our job as lay people is to use the gifts that God gifted us with. When I finished last year at this adult forum, and I didn't have this PowerPoint to support me with information or videos, and I talked about the people in the pews, those people that have never gotten involved in ministry, I call them pew potatoes. Some smart aleck somewhere, not in this town, said, well, the pew potatoes kids are called tater tots, right? And I went, yes, right. This woman comes up to me last year, and I don't even remember, I can just kind of see her face. She comes up to me when I finished, and she says, that's it. I've been a pew potato the whole time I've been a member here. I'm getting off the pew potato list, and I'm going to join. And she told me what ministry she was going to get involved with. So the big thing, and this is a critical piece of Connect, is helping people discern their giftedness. And I know right after my adult forum last year, you all were going to have a workshop on somebody came in to help people discern their spiritual gifts. And you know, it's not a scary thing for us as Episcopalians. This is one of my favorites. I've got this online as a resource. This is a little inventory written by a Presbyterian minister many years ago, and it's about the 7 motivational spiritual gifts that are in Romans. And these are mercy and teaching and prophecy and giving and exhorting and serving and administration. And the biggest light bulb that went on for me when I became Episcopalian was this. You know, I grew up Southern Baptist in Mississippi, and by the grace of God, after my divorce when I was in my early 40s, I was invited to church. A woman on the Symphony League board invited me to church. So I go to an Episcopal church for the first time, and then a year after that, my young life leader invited me, and I wound up becoming Episcopalian 19 years ago. But before that, I was a member of the First Baptist Church outside of New Orleans in Kenner, and I had done a spiritual gifts inventory back then, and my number one spiritual gift was exhortation. But what they did, they asked me if I would teach a class of 9th grade girls, big church. So I started teaching this class of 9th grade girls. Within a couple of months, I got out of it. Loved the girls, was very uncomfortable teaching them. I was 30 years old, and I wound up getting involved with the choir. So fast forward, I'm 44 years old. I become Episcopalian. I go through Community of Hope, a lay chaplain's class. Once again, I took an inventory. What was my number one gift still? Exhortation. What is exhortation? It's encouragement. Teaching isn't even on my radar. And no wonder I felt uncomfortable, I felt burned out, I felt like a failure as a teacher of that class. These, many times a lot of our churches are filled with people with the giving and serving gifts. Richard probably has at least one person on his vestry with the rare gift of prophecy, and that gift of prophecy is important. It is the ability to really speak your truth as God gives it to you. And the spiritual gift of mercy is another one that is really a very interesting one. A lot of people have the spiritual gift of mercy. I have friends that don't have it at all. You know, I worked with a woman who didn't have it, and so she at a church, and I would be going through something, and she'd say, "Oh, Mary, just get over it." But when we get to understand, and we understand what our gifts are, and our spiritual gifts especially, then and only then, I believe, can we really find a ministry that fits those gifts, and that we can use those gifts in the body of Christ. To be effective in business, I want you to listen to this quote. To be effective in business, you often have to challenge the way things have always been done, especially if tradition, read Sacred Cows, is getting in the way of creativity and innovation. I found this in a magazine when I was on a plane recently. And what this says to me is, and this is a big part of Invite, Welcome, Connect, it's a big part of the Connect Essential, it's about being creative and innovative with the things that we do. And I tell you, I didn't have time to download it. The video, if you all haven't seen it, that you did hear of the whole Welcome Essential, where you're inviting people and how to welcome people when they come to church, is really, really powerful. But my passion is to help in each and every congregation not only articulate their uniqueness, but also to empower people for ministry is a huge, huge, big, important part of the Connect Essential. One story I want to share with you is this. I was, our church, I was on staff. I wound up going on staff at this church in Beaumont. I was on staff for 10 years. And during that time, we had an interim, and the interim for about a year, and we had a family come join the church. It was a young family, and this young man said, "Mary, I have an idea for ministry." And he told me this, he says, "I think that we could, how our people love to cook." He said, "Well, you know how all the restaurants get together and they have this taste for the triangle, and you pay $20 and you go down to the Civic Center and you taste, food from all the restaurants." He said, "We love to cook here so much. Why don't we get together and raise money for one of the local nonprofits. I said, which one would you want to do? He said, maybe to some other place. Some other place was a soup kitchen where all the churches got together and fed the homeless and then fed the indigent and then collected clothes and all for them. And so I said, well, I know the director of some other place. I'll give her a call. So I called her. Anyway, long story short, we wound up putting together a committee, pulling together churches, and that they just celebrated their 13th annual tasting for some other place, and the profit was $104,000. For the last 13 years now, they've made a profit from that one little ministry. And I tell that story because empowering you all for ministry and the creative and imaginative ideas that you come up with are really critical to a church, that you share ideas for ministry that you think would be important. And what I could have done during that interim time was say, we would have had to bring in the health department. It would have been hard to do this in an effective way. So I want to close now and tell you one more story. I actually want to show you one more thing. The deep truth of Connect is the sacred act of listening. It's something that we need to really consider. God gave us mouths that close and ears that don't. That should tell us something. I found this little mug when I was leaving Knoxville, Tennessee. My biggest, most important thing I want to tell you here, though, is that with the Connect Essential, and this is really critical, it's to help unearth those gifts of all the people out there, as I said, that are sitting in our pews, empowering them for mission and ministry. Each congregation in the Episcopal Church has a unique culture, and our task as clergy and lay leaders is to help them embody courage, creativity, imagination, and risk, recognizing possibilities for ministry that are derived from their values and strengths. Plus, it's immense fun. Where else in the Episcopal Church can you find things like, Matthew, Mark, and margaritas? The deep truth, the sacred act of listening. One of the churches that I did some work with a year ago was St. Peter's in Ladue, and I asked them to give me some feedback on this little small church in an upscale area of St. Louis. And Luke Jernigan wrote this. He says, Mary, after a year of really using the principles of invite, welcome, connect, what I've really seen is it's only partly about evangelism. The primary outcome here has been transformation. Transformation. St. Peter's has become a different parish. Longtime members talk to each other. More people stay for breakfast, participate in adult forum and adult formation. So I am convinced today, and I want to leave you with this thought. I am convinced that we can change the narrative in the Episcopal Church. I am convinced that we can change the culture to finally move from maintenance to mission, from calling ourselves the frozen chosen, to being a place where transformation can happen, but it's going to take courageous clergy and laity who are serious about leading the way. Intentional listening, get out of our comfort zone, full of holy curiosity, willing to be risk takers for the sake of the gospel, having the courage just to invite someone to church, the courage to discern your giftedness, and then the courage to use those gifts then in the body of Christ. I would love to see at the end of the day that we change the sign that says the Episcopal Church welcomes you to the Episcopal Church, invites you, welcomes you, and connects you to ministry.